Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness.
This is episode 127.
You are listening to Let's Be Well Together podcast. It's John Webster, and I'm here with Elise Seifert. Hey, Elise.
Hey, John.
Let's talk about that article you sent me. What is self-care and why is it important? And again, lately, we're not really focusing on going through the article line by line or anything like that. There is a section here we want to go over, but just tell me generally, why did it speak to you? And then let's go from there.
Well, this article popped up for me and it reminded me of a time when I was first starting my career as a teacher. So when I was a new teacher, there were a lot of optional workshops that were kind of available to us to help us. So I attended an optional workshop about self-care, which I think is pretty important for people when they're starting their career. There's a lot of time and effort and energy that goes into those first few years. So it was a really interesting workshop to attend. And a lot of the people who were there said, I thought self-care meant something that's really expensive.
Right.
So
spoiling yourself
on a really expensive vacation, that's self-care.
Right. You know what? Every once in a while, I deserve a little self-care.
Exactly. Or every once in a while, I should get myself a manicure or go to the spa, or I want to treat myself to this food that I usually restrict from myself. But while we were in the workshop, we talked a lot about how self-care really is just taking care of those needs that you have. Or maybe from our context here at the podcast, it's working on balancing those different facets. And that really is self-care and making sure you're taking time to find that balance. So when this article came up for me, I thought this is really interesting because it came to the same findings that people think self-care is one thing, when in reality, it's just taking care of yourself.
And what I liked about it, so you had that experience where the article aligned with what you learned in that course. What I like about it is anytime, like I kind of came up with this approach to wellness and the 8 different categories and trying to find balance and checking in on all that stuff. And so anytime I see something else that's kind of lines up with it, it makes me feel, okay, I'm onto something. And this one definitely lines up with it because when they're talking about self-care, there's a whole bunch of different kind of areas that they talk about. And that's right. A similar approach. But in terms of self-care itself, people think of it as, spoiling themselves, being able to do stuff, buy stuff for themselves. What the World Health Organization associates with self-care are things like hygiene, nutrition, lifestyle factors such as exercise level and leisure activities, environmental factors such as a person's living condition or social habits, socioeconomic factors such as a person's income level or cultural beliefs, and self-medication and following treatment plans for current illnesses. So a lot more about actually caring for yourself in that way.
And, that's what the word is, self-care, is taking care of yourself. But I think maybe social media presents this kind of idea of what a glamorous occasion self-care should be.
One thing we should go through in the article is I'll read out what people think self-care is, and then you read out the bullets of what self-care actually is.
Perfect.
So here's what people think. Overindulgence in spending. Binge eating your favorite but unhealthy foods. Participating in activities that provide instant gratification. Going on expensive and lavish vacations. Perfecting oneself by any means necessary. Numbing bad feelings using alcohol or illicit substances. And binge watching television.
And then the article lists what self-care actually is. Prioritizing one's physical and mental health. Adopting healthy lifestyle habits that can be maintained long-term. Eating a healthy diet. Finding exercise activities that you enjoy and participating in them regularly. Getting an adequate amount of good quality sleep. Following treatment plans for existing conditions accordingly. And finally, taking time out for yourself to participate in healthy activities you enjoy.
A theme that kind of resonates with me now based on my own learning and my own experiences. I used to always think of wellness kind of transcending the body, right? So nirvana is some place where my mind is going to get to once I abandon all body and desires and all that stuff. But I've been doing a lot better once I realized that my body is a huge part of wellness and I start taking care of it and I feel great because of it. It's really interesting how a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is so focused on the body and the environment that the body's in to give yourself a chance for care.
You saying that kind of reminds me of my yoga training experience. So I know when I was learning about yoga and how to become a yoga teacher, we talked about the different chakras, and the final chakra is nirvana. So, achieving that ultimate happiness. But they taught us that first you really need to master the lower chakras, which include all parts of your body. So it's interesting that in order to achieve that mindfulness, masterfulness, you first have to really connect to your body.
Yeah. And I'm by no means trying to diminish nirvana. I'm just saying that, I use the word in a certain way. And I was always kind of an egghead and thought that everything on the intellectual side was way more important. But I'm doing a lot better now that I'm realizing that the physical is really important, and I take care of things like exercising and watching what I eat and having nutritious food. I just feel better all the time when I'm walking around, and it seems to open up opportunities for a whole bunch of areas of wellness.
And do you think that's how you treat yourself to self-care, is through exercise and positive eating?
Yeah, I'm not really, I don't know, self-care isn't really something I've thought too much about. I did think the article's interesting because I see it on social media a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think I'm more kind of just approaching things, trying to do things that I know work for me. And when I look through this, they have all these different headings, I'll just scroll through. What types of self-care are there? Physical health, mental health, relationships, okay, social wellness, spiritual, which is on our list. And, essentially what this is, I think, saying is the same thing I'm trying to say, which is work on these different areas of wellness with actual activities, real activities that you can do. That kind of, to me, is self-care.
Exactly. I think when I reflect on my self-care, I think about activities that I take time actively to do for myself. So, for example, exercise is one of those activities that I need to schedule for myself, and I need to make sure that I follow through on that. And that's an activity that I do for me. Another one that I like to do that I consider self-care is reading, because I think it takes a lot more effort for me to sit down and read a book than to just turn on the TV and kind of zone out. So I think that's another activity that I like to do, that I'm saying this is for myself and this is something I enjoy doing that will help me either academically or just help me to unwind. And that's kind of what I consider self-care for myself.
Another thing for me lately too is I'm trying not to overthink stuff. And actually it's pretty funny because I just finished listening to the book Brave New World today. It's an old book, and I like to throw in some of the old ones with some of the new ones. And there was a line at one point, it was pretty funny, kind of the know-it-all of this place was talking to the savage guy. And he said something, that there was a philosopher named Bradley, and this is probably true, who said that philosophy is just someone coming up with bad reasons to explain what we already know by intuition, right? Yeah, so we can go through and explain all these things like why I do self-care and what I like, but basically I'm trying to just live my life now. I'm gravitating towards the activities that bring wellness into my life. Try not to overthink it all the time. Try not to have to explain it all the time or justify it as self-care, but I'm trying to kind of live every day in that way.
And I think that's a great way to take care of yourself.
Yeah, so maybe that my self-care is not thinking about it so much. Now, when I do look at their kind of 3 tips on how to practice self-care, it is interesting. It touches on my wellness check-in. It's not exactly the same. The 3 points: determine your overall level of health, identify your stressors, and identify your coping strategies. I think that's part of it. I think things a little more broadly. Definitely you need to think about your overall health. But, in terms of my check-in, if I'm feeling off, I try and think about these different areas. And, the first easy way to try and explain why I'm feeling off is, oh, right, I'm not doing something in either the social realm, or my finances are really struggling right now and it's causing me stress, that kind of stuff. So not the exact same approach, but similar. They're kind of saying do a little check-in.
They are. It's always so interesting to see how many strategies there are out there that really support what we talk about here on this podcast.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds.
Today's interview is in the category of physical wellness. We're speaking with Martin Pytela about nutrition and how it affects our well-being. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
Martin Pytela is a highly regarded functional medicine expert and metabolic typing coach with a passion for restoring vitality to individuals and the planet. He has extensive experience alongside a commitment to holistic health and wellness. Martin is a certified metabolic typing advisor who offers his health coach services based on metabolic typing. This is a method that helps determine which foods and supplements will be most appropriate for different people. So Martin, let's talk about nutrients. Maybe just the general point initially of why it's important to get the right nutrients.
Right. We are dependent on energy. Energy comes into us with the macronutrients, which are carbohydrate, fat, and protein. Those are readily accessible. You eat some starch, like grains, that's mostly carbs. Fats, well, that's either seeds or nuts or oils or maybe animal. That comes with protein and fat together. Those are macronutrients to us. And calories are important for day-to-day or minute-to-minute existence. But the other nutrients, pigments, polyphenols, vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, all of that other business, that's really important for our long-term survival. That's what maintains the health. Because when you're converting food into energy, you're burning stuff. There's fire in your cell. It's in the mitochondria, and it actually produces similar effect to what you would see in a campfire, heat and damage. And you need to undo the damage by protecting this in an envelope that is essentially antioxidants. Otherwise, you age really fast.
So is it oversimplifying to say that these these macronutrients like carbs and fat and whatnot, that's kind of the fire, and these other nutrients, the micro ones you're talking about, are the protections that you're mentioning?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the what holds us together. I will not last very long without the macronutrients, but I will die very young without the micronutrients.
And the micronutrients too, like one thing, I like to eat a lot of whole food, natural food, a lot of vegetables and whatnot. And I take it that a lot of the good nutrients are coming in vegetables and fruit and that type of stuff?
Yes, exactly.
And what is a metabolic type?
So metabolic typing has determined that there are dominances in how we process energy. Similar to, I could be right-handed or left-handed. I could be also dominated by either the oxidizing system or the regulating system, which we call autonomic. And so I could be an autonomic dominant or oxidizer dominant, and they convert energy and react to inputs differently. Autonomic is alkalized by carbohydrates and acidified by fats and proteins, and the oxidizer is the other way around, complete mirror image. And so to alkalize me will mean that I will procrastinate and I will be despondent. And if you really push me far into alkalinity, I will actually be depressed. Acidity, on the other hand, is impatience, then deeper in loss of social graces, interrupting others, being rude and ugly. And further in, if you inward direct it, you will be anxious, worries, anxiety, fear. If you outward direct it, it will be anger and rage. Road rage is a fine example of over-acidic, out-of-control person. So, food inputs. If I am the left-handed type who is alkalized, and it's not tied left-handed, right-handed.
Right. You're just using
If
an
I
example.
am going to be alkalized by carbohydrates and I overdo carbohydrates, I'll fall asleep. And when I wake up, I'll be depressed about it. If I overdo my acidity, I will probably pick a fight with someone and will regret later that I have treated them very unkindly.
I often hear antioxidants. Is that something you could describe to kind of a layperson like me? Like, what is
An antioxidant?
Yeah, like how does that work, an antioxidant?
Okay, well, every transaction has the oxidation and reduction side. It's the exchange of electrons. When an electron is taken away, that's called oxidation. And when an electron is given, that's called reduction. So in everything that you do, one side is the giver and the other side is the taker. So in case of wood burning in a fire, the oxygen is coming in and the wood is donating carbon and heat. The heat is expended, the carbon is converted into carbon dioxide, and up it goes. So in this case, we're oxidizing the carbon. So inside of a human body, oxidation looks like rusting, aging, wrinkles, pain, all that sort of stuff. And the antioxidant is there like a blanket that you throw on fire, that you put out the missing electron. You donate the electron into the oxidation that created the deficit.
Okay. And I know I'm hitting you with lots of different questions.
That's cool. Yeah.
What about superfoods? What's a superfood?
Well, superfood is a marketing moniker. It really talks about stuff that is better than regular food. So either you're going to combine several food items together that they will be stronger than the one thing on its own, like a team. You know, the sum of its parts is better than the individual thing.
Gotcha.
So that you can make a superfood by combining wheatgrass, barley grass, chlorella, spirulina, ashwagandha, this, that, blah, blah, blah. Put that stuff together and you will have a superfood.
Okay.
And then another way that people have used that is that they pick one thing, like, say, moringa oleifera, moringa leaf are phenomenal nutrients. They're like stronger than anything else by, say, this much, right? Blueberry is a superfood because when you eat a lot of blueberry, you're going to be well nourished.
Okay. I'm going to come back to how do we figure out what metabolic type I am or a different person is.
Sure, we can.
But just before I go there.
I'm sorry to stop you.
Oh, yeah, please.
I didn't get to say the other part when you do the metabolic typing test.
Oh, yeah, please.
The other thing that we will determine and answer is what your endocrine dominance is. And there are 3 in men, 4 in women. And they are, you could be dominant by your thyroid, adrenal, or pituitary. And each one of them looks different. Are you the runner on the Accidentally Well cover?
That's right.
That's a thyroid body type.
Okay. You can just tell by looking at me?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. The adrenal body type looks like a linebacker. He is a weightlifter. He is strong. He puts weight on his shoulders, on his chest, and he's very well built like a brick house.
Gotcha.
Fridge. The pituitary dominant is built more like a nerd. The legs are usually knock knees. He's usually blubbery, fatty. The head is larger. The hair is usually curly. I don't know. Just think of the most stereotypical nerd and you got pituitary.
Okay. And this is just one element of the metabolic type.
Well, so each one of those has a preference to how to eat food.
Okay.
Thyroid type should be eating 3 meals a day, about equal size, each with some protein that will maintain well. Adrenal type does best when he has tiny or no breakfast, light lunch, heavy dinner. Pituitary is flipped. A large breakfast, small lunch, no dinner. So you need to play into the dominance. And the other thing is a thyroid gains weight with starch and loses weight with fat.
Interesting.
Adrenal is completely opposite. Adrenal will gain weight with fat and lose weight on fruit and salad. So when you tell somebody, well, go keto, well, that works awesome for a thyroid who wants to lose weight, who is alkalized by fats. He'll be peaceful and even keeled. If you give it to the same thyroid type that is acidified by fat, he'll be a miserable prick.
Right. And if you're trying to determine a person's metabolic type, can you kind of tell by looking at them, or is there some kind of test that you run? How does that work? Well,
the metabolic type is clearly just picture, visual.
Gotcha.
The metabolic dominance is not obvious visually. You cannot easily tell.
So I'm going to jump to a kind of a side topic right now, which is, so I really like the idea of eating whole food, natural food, real food, especially when you're eating fruits and vegetables. As I said, there's lots of nutrients. When you turn and look at processed food and ultra processed food, what's happening there? I'm assuming there's an absence of nutrients, but is it more than that? Is it harming you in some way?
Well, okay. So 1, soils have been depleted by the practice of the modern agricultural methods, which is the NPK fertilization. nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So you're pushing the plants to grow fast, and you're pushing them to grow big, but they're hollow.
Right.
In chemical sense, they're deficient. They don't have the nutrient density that you'd want. In fact, it's reflected. You can look at magnesium content of corn today is 10% of what it was 150 years ago.
Is there somewhere where you can get real food that has the higher nutrients?
Organically grown in a biodynamic systems, preferably supported by Rudolf Steiner aware grower.
Okay.
Right? Sing to the plants and stir the water and put copper sticks in the soil and then mineralize the soil, rock dust it. Be a aware food grower.
How could someone like me find that kind of stuff? Like, is it available in stores? Is there something I can look for on a label?
The closest you'll come is organic.
Okay. And then one last thing, I'm going to come back and ask you some questions about what you do with your website and whatnot. But another question I had is, what's metabolic detoxification? I saw that reference in one of your articles.
Well, there are two types of detoxification. Right? Like you have two types of toxins that you bring into your body. One is the industrial age garbage, which will be heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, chemicals, plastics, whatever. That's a group of its own. Natural metabolites, the natural, even if you lived in a clean way eating organic food, you will have metabolites.
Okay.
You will produce poop and all that stuff. And your food needs to be properly processed in your mouth, your stomach, your intestines, and so on. And even still, your lymphatic system doesn't have a natural pump. It only moves when you bounce the body against gravity. So walking or running or waving arms and other activities are awesome because they are actually helping to circulate the extracellular or interstitial fluids where a lot of this stuff is contained. So if you are creating a swamp by being too sedentary or by eating foods that are too rich in this and not well in that, so you're going to start creating metabolic toxicity. And that needs to come out with as much importance as the other one. So do you want me to talk about how?
Yeah, please do. And also let me know a little bit about your life enthusiast approach and so.
Sure. Well, Life Enthusiast is a business I started back in 2002, and it's actually Life Enthusiast 2.0. The original 1.0 was started in 1989 by a colleague who invented the superfoods, Exula brand superfoods that we sell in Life Enthusiast. About a third of what we sell is these superfoods we make ourselves. And the business itself is based on me believing in biological individuality, which means that I'm not treating a case, I'm treating a person. I'm not treating an illness, I'm treating a living entity. And biological individuality is important. And this metabolic typing is part of it, understanding that if you're this type, then I will make you worse doing this and make you better doing that. And so now these detoxes, that's essentially understanding the flushing of stuff. One, you need to have something that makes your water wetter. There are devices that will decrease the surface tension, acidity, ORP, and cluster size of water, which are things that are not normally measured. Typical engineer will just say H2O, pH this, and that's all we know.
And
but there's more to it.
Is that because changing the water somehow helps to move things out of the body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you lower the surface tension and the cluster size, the water becomes more able to dissolve things in it. And it also, because of cluster size, gets inside of cells and out of cells with greater efficiency. So you will move nutrients in and toxins out with greater efficiency, and that helps. So having energized water, and I'll show you. See, here's a glass of water, and in the bottom of it, there are these special ceramics, and they, by the presence, are just helping to break up the clustering that the water would get into normally. So that's one, plus water. Two, plenty of antioxidants. Three, You need to get some good quality of the mucosal membrane within you. Mucosal membrane is lining your nose and lungs, mouth and digestive, and your reproductive organs too. And that is the interface. Like if you roll down your lip, you're touching the mucosal membrane. It's more permeable than your thick skin, but it needs to be protected by mucus, the mucosal barrier. So you need things that will help you with protecting it, nutrients. And then in the gut, if there is microbiome dysbiosis all the way to leaky gut, then you will be creating all kinds of health problems. And then if your colon is moving too slowly, you will be extracting too much of toxins into your body. And if it's moving too fast, you will be not extracting enough nutrients out of it. So you need to manage that. And then, of course, whatever happens in the small intestine goes right into the blood, which hits the liver, which liver is multifunction, but one of them is filtration. And so if the liver's function is diminished, filtration is impacted, you start becoming toxic. So we need to work on the liver. It needs to move. And then what the liver can't catch, the kidneys are supposed to filter away. If you overload your liver, you will probably overload your kidneys. So you need to now have a cascade. The lymphatics are impacting your liver, is impacting your kidneys, and what's the last one? The blood, the health of the blood, that's the spleen. So all of that needs to be working.
And all of this is affected by the food that you eat. And
let's visualize. Let me feed you some deep fried stuff that's wrapped in a bun that's been grown in a field drenched by Roundup, and you start putting that in you, right?
Yeah, it's scary.
There you go, right? Like that whole thing just cascades, Have some genetically modified corn with some badly treated cow eating that genetically modified corn, making the dairy from which the cheese is made that's on your pizza, and the pig that eats really crappy food that made the sausage that's on top of your pizza. Let's just feed it to you.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very appetizing.
Well, but that's the input. Garbage in, garbage out.
So how can we find you if we wanted to find some articles, some of the products that you have, some of the information?
The website is life- like the minus sign, enthusiast.com. And everything's there. There are podcasts and articles, and I've been at it for 20 years. There's plenty of content. And we try to structure it in such a way that a person who's curious enough and interested enough in taking care of their own health, that they can educate themselves in understanding not just the health alone, but the full context, the web of life. You need to understand the whole thing. There isn't just nutrition. There's much more to it.
It's funny because I always thought of the expression, you are what you eat. But after I talk to you, I see it a bit differently. It's you're either destroyed or enhanced by what you eat. Like if you're eating that terrible food, you're breaking down. You're not becoming that food, but it's breaking your body down. It's burning you up.
Well, let's put 3 words on it. Appropriation, what you put in. Absorption, what you actually keep. And elimination, what you get rid of. If any one of those 3 is impacted, you have deficits.
Okay. Well, we're burning through our time. Let me turn to the question we ask every guest. It's in the context where we all have different areas of wellness that are important to us, but we're all so busy, it's hard to keep them all going at any given time. Yeah. And so we do a mini wellness check-in. And so the question, Martin, for you is, are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one thing you can do to foster wellness in that area?
Yeah, for me, it would be time management for sure. See that piano behind me?
I do.
It's untouched.
Oh, no.
Well, it's the time, right? Like I do interviews like you are doing it, and I help people. I get calls all the time. And yes, I play a bit, but nowhere near enough as I would want. And therefore, also my physical, I do exercise every day, but not long enough. I move every day, but I would like to be more vigorous at it. So that's probably something that I am well aware that I need to do better.
Well, good luck, because time management is the problem for all of us. One quick point, if you look at my little wheel, artistic is at the top. And I do hope you get to your piano, because a lot of people don't actually connect artistic to wellness and well-being. But to me, it's a really big part of it. A lot of times when I'm feeling off, when things aren't going great, it's art, music, all that stuff that helps me feel a bit better.
Absolutely.
Okay, Martin, well, thanks very much. We're going to have you back to talk about how the environment impacts our well-being. But this is really fascinating, and I have a lot better perspective now on why I better be careful what I take in, plus what I absorb, plus what goes out.
Yes, indeed.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of the Adventures of the Starving Artist. I was looking at my calendar for the month of May, and it was pretty sparse in terms of gigs. Now, sometimes that can be a bit concerning, especially when I rely upon that for my, rent and grocery money and things of that nature. But the rockstar day job has been picking up some of the slack there right now, so I was feeling okay about some downtime. That was a foolish thing to do. Little did I know that while I was expecting some downtime, the universe had other plans for me. And so this week, a whole bunch of stuff has been dropped into my lap. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not complaining. This is stuff I want to do. I did sort of have my sights set on some lazy days, though. But that's okay. It's all good stuff coming in. The first thing I want to tell you about is it's a group I've worked with before. They go by Chrysalis Films. And a few years ago, they'd asked me to do a song in the style of another song because, long story short, they didn't have the funds to secure the rights to do a cover song that they wanted to cover. So instead, they asked me, could you write a song that fits the same vibe that we're going for and lyrically is the same sort of content, but your own thing? And so I did that, and it worked out. And that film was called The Dark Room. And it's a very intense short, worth checking out, The Dark Room. Pretty cool flick. So that team got back in touch with me, and similar story. They have a song that they want to use. They don't have the budget constraints too small to secure the rights to do a proper cover of it, so they've asked if I can do the same sort of thing. But this time it's pretty cool. Whereas last time I had to write, record, produce, mix, master, everything. This time, one of the guys on their squad is a music producer, an up-and-coming music producer, and he asked if he could do the bed track and then send it over for me to do the vocals. So on the one hand, I have less input on the creative process because I'm not doing all of the music underneath it. But on the other hand, it saves me a lot of work and time because the idea is already laid out for me, and then I get to get creative with vocal stuff, so lyrics and melody. So it's cool. And what's super cool about it is, just like last time, it's all remote because that's the day and age that we're in now. We can record from anywhere, and it's pretty sweet. So I'm looking forward to getting the ball rolling on that. And the second one, also very cool, it requires a little backstory. So you may remember that while I am the professional musician in the family, most of my immediate family is musical in some way. So my brother is a singer and a guitar player. He's recently picked up his guitar quite a bit again. My dad sings and my mom plays the flute. But my brother is in the Capitol Chamber Choir here in Ottawa. It's an auditioned group, very talented group of singers. And their choir manager dropped me a line over the weekend asking if I would be interested in playing electric guitar for one of the movements of one of the contemporary pieces that they're working on. So that's pretty cool. I have to learn some neat stuff for that, but hopefully I can fit it into my schedule. The timing for the concerts and the rehearsals is right before I'm supposed to leave town for other concerts, so it's going to be kind of tight, but I'm going to see if I can pull it off. And if nothing else, it's always an honor to be considered and asked to perform, especially with a group like that. So I'm pretty excited to get creative on this stuff over the next few days. So much for the downtime, but like I said, no complaints. Life is good. And you know what they say, life happens when you're making plans. I hope you're having a fantastic week. I hope some cool projects fall into your lap this week. For now, that's all I've got. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners and thanks for joining us. Please help spread the word about Let's Be Well Together podcast. Follow us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together and let your friends know about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
I don't know why, for fun, if we do 2 parts, I like to say part 2. I just think it sounds kind of cool. But this is part 3, and I don't know if part 3 is as good. Anyway, we've done gym etiquette on episode 57. We did part 2 on episode 104, and here we are doing part 3.
Okay, here we go.
I'm just going to tell you these 4 things first, and we'll come back and talk about them.
Awesome.
Number 1. So we've already done 10. So I don't know if this is 11 or 1.
Okay.
But number 1. Be flexible about your routine if the gym is crowded. Number 2, be mindful of your surroundings in the context of a gym being a dangerous place. Number 3, make friends and only give advice when asked. That's a really important one to me. And number 4, regardless of where you are, don't flirt. Okay, the gym isn't a place for
John,
flirting.
don't flirt.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm not a flirter. Okay, so let's go through some of them. So number 1, you talk about this a lot because I don't usually go upstairs where all the weights are. I do most of my weight training at home. And you have kind of a circuit that you like to do.
I do.
And, especially now, it seems like people are coming in groups, young people coming in groups, and they're all 4 sitting around talking. So what do you do?
I have a set of 6 exercises that I do. So they're not all machine. Sometimes they're free weights. And so I just find what machine is available and I go to that. But the other thing that I do is the popular machines. So there's a few popular machines. So if I see someone on that and I can kind of tell, well, they just got on that, how many reps they've done and that kind of stuff, I kind of scope out those machines because as soon as they get off them, I run because those are hard to get.
So, and are you saying that, maybe if you're on paper, your routine was do exercise A, B, C, D, and E, and this is D, you might do it for B or A.
Yeah, for sure.
If it's free.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter what order you do your workout in, just as long as you do them all. So yeah, I will do those. If those machines are free, I will go to them directly because there's some machines that nobody uses. So I don't have a problem with that. And then the free weights are usually pretty easy to find. I must say that they're easy to find because there's usually different sets of them. There's like 3 of each, but sometimes they're not put away. So you have to literally walk around the gym trying to find the weight that you need.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And that's one thing I don't quite get too. I would have thought like the gym has so much stuff, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to things like dumbbells, everybody uses some dumbbells, like let's say 25 pounds.
Right.
Everyone's going to use those at some point. Why don't they have, if there's 3 sets overall of dumbbells, why don't they have like 6 or 8 sets of 25s? Yeah. Anyway.
More of certain.
That's just me complaining, but the point is be flexible in terms of your routine.
Exactly. And be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, in terms of mind your surroundings, it's just common sense, but you just got to remember the gym is a place where there's a lot of weird things happening. Somebody pulls a machine and something kicks out, or you might be swinging a kettlebell, right? And someone else might be doing the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So you just always have to make sure you're safe.
Yeah, especially when you're talking to people. People will stop you and have conversations, and they're right in the way of where you're supposed to be doing your workout. So you have to be like,
that's a good point too.
So people just have to be aware when they stop and talk, just to kind of pull themselves to the side or kind of out of the way.
It's kind of 2 sides to it. One is watch out because somebody might be in your way. So, you don't want to hurt them.
Right.
But also watch out because you might be getting in somebody's way.
Right.
And of course, if you're leaving your weights in a dangerous spot, you're putting people in danger. So just generally common sense. That's great gym etiquette to watch your surroundings. Mm-hmm. The next one is really important to me, and we may have talked about it before, but yeah, make friends. No, I'm not that great at it. I'm kind of an introvert.
Mm-hmm,
I respond to other people by smiles, but I don't usually say, hey, stranger, how are you? But you're better at it.
Well, it's your face. Like you don't have this bright face all the
I've got
time.
like a resting bitch
You've
face.
got a retching, like not resting bitch face, but you definitely are thinking. I can tell that your mind's constantly going and you've got this look on your face like you're thinking and stuff, and people don't want to disrupt you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a side effect of long distance running.
Maybe.
Like usually I'm running for quite a while.
Yes.
And so I'm listening to music or I'm thinking about something, but then again, my mind's always spinning, so who knows?
Yeah.
So make friends. But I don't like unsolicited advice.
I don't like it either.
And you get a lot of it at the gym.
You can, yeah.
And I definitely so people think it's funny, but I'm always like, well, I do have a thought. I don't want to say anything because I don't like giving unsolicited advice. So let me know if you want to know it.
Yeah. And I had someone come up to me and ask me, do I mind if they tell me something? If they make a suggestion or something. And I was like, yeah, no problem. And I was doing my squats and he said that I was favoring one leg to the other.
No.
So my squat wasn't even, and I didn't know that.
To me, that's a great experience. Somebody who says, can I give you a tip?
Yeah.
And especially at that gym when you can tell some of these guys have so much experience and they're so good at what they do.
Exactly.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So sometimes, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to give people advice, but just ask them first. Unsolicited advice and sometimes people just don't have time for it, right? You're trying to punch that workout in within a certain time and people are stopping.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. Like only give advice when asked. I think it's fair to ask, do you want advice? Mm-hmm. And lastly, we'll just deal with this quickly because we're out of time too, but don't flirt. Okay. Like a lot of people, and I think this is a great point because I think it relates more to women because of the way guys tend to act. I don't want to speak for women, but the women who've talked to me said, one thing that kind of keeps them away from the gym is they just want to work out and people talk to them or look at them or Google them or whatever. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I know some women who go to women-only gyms for that reason. It's much more comfortable. I agree that you shouldn't flirt. That would be lovely. I don't mind being with men. I don't mind because sometimes I'm watching them do things and it's really great. I get, I can watch them and see how they do certain types of exercises. But yeah, don't flirt with me.
Yeah, simple rule, easy to follow. Let people work out. The gym's not a place to approach them.
There's a thought. Popped up while running.
When I'm thinking about my approach to wellness, I have these analogies that I often talk about. And one is surfing, one is something from Eat, Pray, Love, one is Sheila's dance balance analogy. And all of these I covered in prior episodes. I recently came across a nice analogy I liked from Michael A. Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. And he was talking about a text by Lao Tzu. It's an ancient text, and it's called Tao Te Ching. I actually have this, and I've had it for a long, long time. I used to study Kung Fu, and I bought it at the time. I'll start reading it every once in a while, but to be honest, I have a hard time working my way through it, trying to understand it. One thing I never really got was what is Tao? And he explained it in a nice way, which is the way. But essentially, it's kind of the path of life, and there's a whole bunch of aspects to it. And I'm going to go back to that text and have a look and try and work my way through it again. But he had this great analogy, and he was talking about living between extremes. So the Tao, the way, it's not usually at the extremes. And that goes nicely when you think about concepts like the ancient Greeks who talked about everything in moderation. It also gels with my experience in life where things seem to go better when I'm not at the extremes. His analogy is a great one. It's about sailing. Sailing is a good example, and he points out that there are many forces interacting together. So even if you're just focusing on the boat and not the external factors like the waves and the wind, you have the sail, you have the rudder, you have tension in the ropes and how they affect the sail. You might be holding the sail the same tightness, but depending on how the wind is blowing, that might be too loose, in which case it doesn't work very well. Or it might be too tight, in which case you might tip the boat over. You've got to hold and pull the rope just right. And he asks us to imagine the feeling when the wind hits the sails just right, and we're holding the ropes just right, and we take off with a perfect feeling of balance. Isn't that great? And it's somewhere in the middle. It's not too tight, it's not too loose. But meanwhile, the whole situation is dynamic, and the wind is changing all the time, the waves. So that means my equilibrium is forever changing, and so is the response I have to make is ever changing. But I can stay in that sweet spot, but I need to pay attention and make adjustments. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
Hello, everyone. It is Elise and Steven back for another edition of Flip Side of the Coin.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Today, John asked us a really interesting question that we thought we'd bring to the podcast. His question was about differences in teaching between South Korea and Canada. So both Steven and I have taught in South Korea for 2 years. And John was just wondering what we noticed we learned from that experience in our teaching now. So Steven, what do you think you've learned from teaching in South Korea that you've brought to your teaching now?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. The first thing I think about is that when it comes to children, South Korea, Canada, the US, children are children. So at their core, they really have a lot of the same personality traits. And some of the trimmings are a little different, but they are really similar. Now, one thing that I really noticed when I was teaching in South Korea is that body language played such a vital role. And
so important as we were teaching in their, second, third, fourth language.
Exactly. So, it was every eyebrow raise or just pauses that you would give and the stance that you would have because it conveys so much meaning. So it wasn't always what I was saying. It was more how I delivered it and the pacing. So that was one thing that really I think about all the time, even in my day-to-day lessons, is how is my pacing? Am I speaking too quickly? Am I conveying what I want to convey? Are there going to be misconceptions? So that's another thing, is something that you say that might have more than one meaning. And these children are learning a lot of words, and sometimes they'll have the same sound, but they have different meanings, those homophones.
Of course.
And so always talking about those misconceptions. When I say this, I really mean this. And so body language and making sure that your meaning is conveyed. And that was my experience. But Elise, how about you?
Yeah, well, I think that was a really interesting takeaway. And I think it's so important for you to think about those things as a teacher. And then you also have that experience teaching in the US as well. So between Canada, US, and South Korea. So that makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
For me, I think I learned a lot about language acquisition, which is important for me as I do teach French now here in Canada.
Sure.
So I think applying a lot of those same practices. And I do think I learned a lot about how important it is to make authentic learning experiences when you're doing language acquisition and how important that is for students to learn. I do think a lot of what we were teaching in South Korea was really challenging for the students. It allowed them to increase their vocabulary, but I'm not sure if it really helped them to interact authentically in an English setting.
Right, exactly.
So I think for me, I was learning more of how I wanted to teach and what I didn't want to continue to teach. So really trying to make more authentic language learning experiences and how important it is when you're learning a new language.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And coming from your perspective, where this was the first time that you were teaching in that kind of setting versus me having taught in Korea once before, in addition to other classroom experiences that I had had for multiple years as a supply teacher.
Right. And I do think it was really interesting how cautious you had to be about the words that you used. And it did completely change my vocabulary. I think I lost a lot of my vocabulary when I was teaching English as a second language, just because you're not using so many words that you just kind of lose them.
Yeah, and for me, I did lose my vocabulary, but I also thought about how to enunciate those words. And so I was really trying to speak as clearly as possible and try to limit my accent that I have naturally.
Oh, yeah? I don't feel like you have an accent.
Right, but even at that time, I was really trying to eliminate that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I bet that was really tricky.
You get used to it.
Yeah, I guess because you're really thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there was lots to learn. I think every working experience you pick up on something new, but I do think these were really important fundamental ideas to bring into our career. And I think it's really helped us both.
Yeah, I wouldn't be where I am now without those experiences.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct. or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. It's Sheila here with Elise and John.
Hello.
Hi.
And happy Canada Day, everyone who's in Canada. Yeah, it was Canada Day weekend. So really the start of summer here. And we had a very busy weekend, actually. And we got to go to our Collingwood condo, which was lovely. But we had to do the turnover, which is just cleaning and fixing and working and go, go, go. Then we went to Sabo. Then we went to Owen Sound and back we go. So for us, it's been very busy. But I feel like it was very productive as well. So that was great. What about you, Elise?
It is officially the start of summer for me. So this past week was my last week of school.
Yay!
So that was very exciting. It was very busy. I was packing up my classroom because I'm moving to a new role next year. So got that all packed up and everything's in my basement. And then this weekend, we just had a lot of family time because we were able to see my brother and his girlfriend who were visiting Sauble. We had our first dip in the beach on the weekend. So that was great. First dip of the summer. And then we got to see you guys when you came up to Owen Sound. So lots of family time. It doesn't really feel like summer quite yet. I think once we get into the week and I realize I am not going back to work, then it'll really feel like summer.
Very good.
How about you, John?
We almost did sign off at your place this morning using one of our cell phones, but I was tuckered out. Sheila underplayed how much work we had to do this weekend. The people who were in our condo were there for 7 months, and I think they were living there full time. There was a lot to do, and we only had 2.5 days to get everything done after those people lived there and, clean up everything, polyfill it, paint walls, fix things, and all that stuff. I was tuckered out, so then we ended up heading home from your place and doing the sign off now. Quick note on working out. I'm really happy because last week I upped it from 2 to 3 dumbbell workouts, and that made me feel great. And then on Sunday, after I was tuckered out from doing all that work, I still had to get my 10K run in at Collingwood. Mm-hmm. And Collingwood's nice and flat, which is good. Anyway, I went out. I felt fantastic and even kicked it into high gear about kilometer 8 just to see if I could, and I could. So the physical side's going great, which is maybe why I was able to get all that work done, and same with Sheila. So good, busy. I really enjoyed the interview this week. A lot of science, but it makes me think, you know what? Maybe I don't understand it all, but it makes me think that I got to really be careful what I put in and be careful also about making sure it works its way through the system and the bad stuff gets out. So thanks very much for joining us this week again, everyone. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.